So time is flying by and we are absolutely having a lot of fun. The lab has been a little bit of chaos, and that is always the case when we reach these unknown identification labs. It's the first time that we're pressuring individual students to do their own independent work, and that can be a little bit painful. We also put a lot of flexibility in the assignment for the unknown ID plan, and that was hard for some of the students. That is understandable because we're putting them sort of outside of their comfort zone and actually asking them to synthesize something that is original and individual work. So don't worry that some of that might have been a little bit hard. We will have done some very good learning when all is said and done. So we're going to forge ahead with that. And as per the request of several of you, Jonathan, I know, had mentioned he wanted to go through and look at how those rubrics are scored and how to work with those, how to get those entered into the grade book. So we're going to do that. Before we do that, I want to begin with something that I'm just currently feeling really jazzed about. And you're going to see that it is a little bit microbiology related. I don't know if any of you had the same dubious honor as I did over Christmas break. Well, no, over the Olympics. It was during the Olympics. I was actually at someone else's house. I actually don't have a TV and I don't watch TV, but I happened to catch a commercial on TV that made me understand why I don't. I caught this Cadillac commercial, and it was this horrible classist kind of class distinction perpetuating kind of commercial. It was just, it caught me so off guard because it was all about how essentially in America we are all workaholics, and this is a good thing because it allows us to make more money, and making more money is really the answer to everything. And it doesn't matter that, you know, we're basically ruining the earth in doing so. And so very recently Ford, I guess, made a response to Cadillac's commercial, and I don't know if you have seen this or not, but this is in the Huffington Post, and it's an article in the Huffington Post about Ford's response to Cadillac's really terrible, horrible commercial. So if you have a chance, watch Ford's response, and tell me, maybe shoot me an email or something about how it is certainly microbiology related, and I just loved it. So this is currently on my mind. Let's go ahead now and talk about these microskill rubrics, and I want to first begin with the midterm rubric that I know many of you are currently entering into the grade book, and I think we saw a lot of success with assessing this way. In order to turn your rubrics into grades, here's how you do it. Unsatisfactory is, and this is probably far more giving than it should be, but unsatisfactory is going to equal 60%. So notice that, and I'll highlight that. Notice that that is 60% of 5 points. So recognize that right there, 5 points is what this is worth. This particular category is worth 5 points. And then so 60% of 5 points is your unsatisfactory. Your evolving is equal to 80%. So 80% of 5 points for that. Competent equals 90%, which is an A, of course. And so taking 5 times 90, or 0.9, is 4.5. If they get the accomplished mark, that is equal to 100%. So this will allow you to turn their categories into actual numeric grades, and to actually go ahead and give everyone a score for their midterm skill rubric. We'll do the exact same thing for their final skill rubric, and you'll notice that if you happen to be following along with me on your file on the jump drive, this is found on that, you'll notice that there's both a midterm and a final rubric. So this is a good time to begin to think about the final skill assessment rubric, and again, point values are given on that as well, but you'll want to go ahead and begin encouraging students to do their final skill rubric. And so I'm going to use this as a good time to talk about the calendar and when we would like this final skill rubric to be due. So let's bring that up. And notice that time is ticking along and counting down. This week, Friday, Erin and Aaron are going to be doing our open lab, and it's a bit of a hectic week because Tuesday is an exam day. So we'll be dealing with Gen Micro exam at the same time as most of you are doing lab number 20. However, Aaron and Aaron will be moving on, and they'll be doing all the way through lab 22 this week, which means that they're finishing the unknown identification. They're verifying with their students what unknown they had. And that's an important process. We need to make sure that we do have them verify those unknowns before they begin to write their unknown reports. We're going to need to assign the unknown reports. So during lab 21, we will assign the unknown reports, and they will be given a week and a half after that to complete their unknown reports. So for most people, that means that they will be submitting those unknown reports on either April the 14th or April the 15th, which then gives you a little bit of time, probably about a week and a half, to get those graded, because we would like to be able to give them back to them by the 23rd and 24th. And what we've done this time is to actually free up an actual entire dead week. I've had this aspiration for a very long time. So the last week of classes will literally be a dead week for the students. They will not have to come to lab on that week, and that is a great thing. But what it also means, right, is that our skills rubrics, our final skills rubrics, really do need to get done. And what I would like to propose is that we use a similar strategy as we did for the midterm rubrics, and that is that if they don't get their categories assessed until the 23rd and 24th, then they only get one attempt. So beginning on the 23rd or the 24th, if that's when they come in to have those final skills assessed, they will no longer, or even on the 25th during open lab, they will no longer have 2 attempts. But up through lab 20 or lab 26 for most of you, the 22nd of April, up through that date, they still have 2 attempts that they can make on each of those categories. One really cool thing is, and noteworthy, is that for the second skills rubric, there are less categories, less skills that they're being assessed on. So there's a little bit less for them to have to work through for that. Okay, great. A few other things on the up and up. We need to talk about lab 20, lab 21, and lab 22 TA guidelines. We also need to start looking towards the TA party, and I would like to have all of you over for dinner as usual. And I'm thinking that the best time to do that would be on Saturday, April the 12th. So if you could respond to this email that the punctibyte is linked on, if you could go ahead and respond and let me know if the 12th of April will work for you. If a majority of people are free on that night, then I will go ahead and schedule the dinner. If a majority of you are not, then we'll try to go back to the drawing board and think about what we could possibly do for that. So we'll study some fermentation and do a little bit of extra microbiology dorking out, right? I also wanted to talk a little bit about the unknown ID plan, because we just recently had students turn in those unknown ID plans, and you have a rubric attached to that as well. Please do take note that as per the other scheme, as I mentioned, 60%, 80%, 90%, and 100%, but the ID plan for both the gram-positive and the gram-negative in sum total is worth 10 points. So what you're going to have to do for this is just do the percentages and then multiply their average percentage by 10 points. I don't give point values for each one of these categories, and so that will be the better part of valor for scoring those particular rubrics. Please let me know if you have questions about what any of these categories mean as you are trying to assess and grade their ID plan. It would be great if we could get the ID plans turned back to the students prior to them submitting their unknown reports. So no later, getting them their hypotheses, references, and ID plan, getting feedback to them no later than the 2nd or 3rd, so that they can get their, the 7th or 8th, so that they can get their ID plans back in time to allow them to really do a good job of their unknown report, because we asked them to if they struggled a lot with the very nature of the hypotheses, we asked them to resubmit those in the unknown report. So it would be really great if we could go ahead and get good feedback to them about those assignments on either the 7th or the 8th. Okay, great. Sounds good. That is, most of our scheduling considerations are taken into account there, but just noting that really we are starting to come to a close on a lot of this and time is beginning to fly by. So just trying to keep your everything moving in perpetual motion and getting everything done for this. Okay, I think that is most of what I wanted to talk about there, but I want to go on and talk a little bit about the guidelines for Lab 20, 21, and 22. And Lab 20, we continue the biochemical tests and they continue with their checklist. However, we will go ahead and go through some additional biochemical tests and talk about some of the nuances of that. A couple of things for Lab 20 to call your attention to. There's going to be a camp station and a rapid KOH station. The rapid KOH station, please encourage your students to use a slide from their slide box to do that. We're running out of slides and we really do need them to use one of their slides. They will not need many more slides. They're not going to be doing many more gram stains. They'll do one on azotobacter in Lab 24, but otherwise they're really not going to make use of those slides very much more. So if they can sacrifice one for the rapid KOH test, that would be absolutely fantastic. So the camp test, if you could help me keep an eye on the Staph aureus, the Pensen Staph aureus is needed for them to do that synergistic test for those who think they have Streptococcus agalactiae. Also, they are going to be reading the growth patterns in their broth tubes that they inoculated during Lab 19. And if we could help remind them of some of the terms that are used to describe those growth patterns, like if there's growth in the bottom, that's sediment. If there's that really chunky, clumpy growth, that's flocculence. So a lot of different sexy-minded lingo terms that we can give them to help them describe that broth pattern. I often will draw these on the board so that it makes it easier for them to write those observations in their lab manual. And speaking of observations, help me encourage them to continue to write good original entries into their lab notebooks so that they're not plagiarizing the summary of biochemical tests when they retype those. We'd really like for them to have full, complete entries in black pen in their notebooks, just as you would do in good lab protocol, so that they can do a very nice job of retyping those tables in their own words. So continue to help and encourage them in those directions. Lab 21, again, is just continuing and completing the unknown identification. So it is on this day that we will both assign the unknown report and that we will verify the identity of the students' unknowns, unless they've somehow fallen behind, which is also often a possibility. We will have them get their unknowns identified on this day. The other thing that happens during Lab 21 is that they do their MRVP test. And don't forget that the VP part of that takes about 40 minutes to change. So it's important that we get them started on that test immediately when they enter. If you're feeling industrious, you can have students come into the lab a little bit early and begin those VP tests so that there's a little bit of spread as far as demand on the station. It would be nice not to have everybody waiting in line just to add the potassium hydroxide and alpha-naphthol. And speaking of which, those are not very pleasant reagents to splatter all over your body. Please try to remind students to wear their PPE when they go to those stations. And, really, if they're wearing shorts and high heel stilettos with open toes, it would be a really nice idea for them to use a certain amount of caution at that station. I would prefer they weren't wearing those things at all, but I've had students throw alpha-naphthol all over their feet. So not a good thing. A lot of just keeping up with their unknowns on Lab 21 and making sure to get any tests they haven't inoculated. Lab 22 is really when we begin to go into our applied and environmental portion of our coverage. We begin with a coverage of immunology, work into water microbiology, and then soil, and we end the semester with food microbiology. So Lab 22 and Lecture 22 are pretty intense because it's the only coverage that we give to immunology. If you haven't taken immunology or you don't feel comfortable with the concepts of immunology, please ask either Joe, Callie, or myself to do the lecture so that we can really do a good job of this coverage. We want to do a nice job of covering both the innate and the adaptive immune responses, and then also really doing good justice to humoral immunity and looking at the antigen-antibody interactions that are inherent in serology, and talking very specifically about blood typing. And I find that for this particular lecture, it works really great to pick out students from the class who know their blood type and really talk about how their particular blood will interact with the antigens that we add to those blood typing trays. So if you can incorporate students in that discussion, it will make your coverage stronger. And this is something that I love to do. If you want me to sample that lecture and give that lecture for you this time, please let me know, and I will definitely be glad to do that for those sections that I'm available. Okay, so I think that says a lot about the immunology lab, and remember that only Erin and Aaron will go on to that lab this particular week, but that all of us will be headed there eventually. So just a lot coming up, and certainly the semester coming to a close really, really rapidly. I do want all of you to keep in mind that on finals week, you guys are definitely invited to come to the poster presentations. So you might want to go ahead and set that time aside. Oh, and I don't have it on the actual date on here. I think it's actually a Friday final, but I'll make sure that I find out for you and give you that information. Okay, have a lovely rest of the weekend. Thank you for all that you do. I wish that I could do more to tell you how much I appreciate it.